Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Intentional Agribusiness Leader podcast. Today I am joined by Matt Lawrence and honored to have you on the show, man. Thanks for making the time to be with me.
Yeah, appreciate having me. Appreciate being here. Good
Cool.
conversation.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fun conversation today. So let's dive in, man. Matt, what does intentional leadership look like for you?
Really intentional leadership, just really having a purpose and having an objective so people know why you're leading. Really many of the times I've talked with you about this, I try to come across a little unintentional. You don't want to be too intentional that, hey, here's what I got to do, be the boss, the top down type person. You kind of want to come across as one of the team, an advisor, somebody they come to. But as long as you have that planned out on how you're going to work with your people so that they ask you questions and you feel part of the advice and working with them versus intentionally, hey, I need you to do this, 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 and this. If you can really say, hey, where do we get there? How do we get there? How do we get from point A to point B? And let them come along with the ride. That's part of my mentor all the time, is trying to make sure that I have my people bought in on what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say, hey, here's what we're doing. I have many examples of those things when we do segmentation planning, things like that. A lot of people look at that like busy work. But
Yep.
if you bring them along with the idea and how should we construct it, because they all know we should do it somehow, some way, the more the people are bought in on it. So intentionally, I would say I intentionally be a little unintentional with my employees and with my managers so that they know I'm working with them and I'm not just boss top down. But I intentionally do that, and I think you got to have a purpose and an objective, because that's going to be the number one people challenge is, what's the objective here?
Yeah, I think what you're saying, right, is be human, right? Being being approachable, but also bringing people along with buy-in, which we believe is really important. All of our programs are designed to create buy-in so that we can get people to hopefully go to that next phase with us, and
Yeah.
that's an important phase. When it when it comes to that, what are the big challenges that come up for you in getting buy-in? Because a lot of times it does seem like busy work. It does seem like just another thing, another CRM thing I got to fill out, another thing the leadership's asking me to do. So I love what you're saying. I want to keep
Yeah,
rolling with that. So how do we
yeah,
overcome
I'll steal something from one of my managers, actually, I've been using lately, is start with the end in mind.
it?
So if you work with the people and say, all right, here's where we need to get. Now, what are the steps we need to get there? That they understand where they need to get. Usually they agree with where they need to get. It's how they get there that they don't always agree upon. And if you come with a solid, firmed up, this is exactly what we're going to do, you're going to have a lot of people look at you, go, all right, that I wasn't bought in on that. That wasn't part of my plan.
Mhm.
But if you say, hey, let's start with the end in mind. We need to get from to here. So how should we do that, right? What are the steps we should take? Who are the people we should engage with? And what are the activities that we should do or tactics that we should do to get there? So to me, it's a lot about respecting your employees. And you'll hear me say this a lot. Humility is one of my three attributes that I always stick to. I'll name the other ones as we go here, but humility. So I always tell my sales reps, whether it's the guy mopping the floor, the front counter lady, or the guy in the sprayer, or the boss of all the agronomists, you need to talk to all of them, right? And understand that they're all people there and they all have a weigh in on what they're going to buy and what they're going to use. So I do that same thing with my people. I try to make sure that I'm talking with the sales reps. As much as we have manager workers and things to do, you still have to humble yourself to understand that, hey, they have a role and a job to do as well. So engaging them is key, and making sure that they're part of the process.
Absolutely. Love it. Love it, man. Well, let's talk a little bit about, talent attraction and retention, which is a big topic in the ag industry today. It seems some are winning and a lot are not. So what's your take on how to do that? How does intentional leadership play in for you?
Yeah, so I would say really there's a lot of little differences best depending on which part of the ag business market you're in, right? We're a supplier, seller, distributor, seller, retailer, seller, grower. There's different struggles at each of those levels with talent acquisition and retention. Some of the, I would say a lot of the things we do, or I try to do when I'm bringing folks in and have to teach my regional managers to do, we're a right size, if you want to call it, company. So there's a lot of different sizes of companies out there, but it's, those three attributes I'll talk about is really integrity, humility, and accountability. So we try to ensure that when we're bringing folks in, that they understand they're coming into a culture, which I think we'll get into culture as well later here, but they're coming into a culture where we value our sales force, right? We try to involve them in marketing teams, decisions, and what we're going to be doing next year. Now we don't, we bring them in, have them give us advice. We listen to the customer. And the more they see that we're humble like that, we want to know what our customers want. Doesn't mean we can always do it. Like we always tell the customers, can't always do what you ask,
Right.
but we should listen and try to think about how we can do it. But then also, when you're talking with your employees, having the integrity, I would say that attracts employees. Even when we do interviews, I think people get that vibe of when you're, I'll call it too polished. If I can say it a different, some people are just so polished in how they say it, they're not being genuine. Maybe that's the right word. And with that integrity, as much as it is tell the truth, it's also be just genuine, right? When you're genuine with your employees and they know, hey, here's what we got to do. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what we do at your company. I think you attract more people. And I also probably think you retain more people with that generosity and genuineness with your people. But then there's also the part of retention as well as the accountability, the integrity, humility, and the accountability. Accountability is a really strong word. We've been using it a lot lately, but you got to think of the strength side of it, but also the soft side of it. Accountability is really just making sure your people that are at the top doing really, really well, understand that you expect that of the middle and the bottom folks as well, right? And that you're holding people accountable. You're also taking accountability of what goes on as a group, and that there's not such silos as many people call, where they're working in different silos. So going back to the attractiveness, attracting employees, we have a pretty good situation. We work hard to attract employees to what we have here at Valent. And I think when they talk to peers, talk to other folks, or even our customers, they understand those three attributes that we're using. And how much we involve the customer and the employees in a lot of our decisions. So that's one way we do it. Obviously there's a lot of things as far as satisfaction surveys. I would say the number one, 80% of the time that we have our satisfaction surveys, the reason people are here is the people. So I'll kind of circle back to those three attributes. I think that's why it's because those attributes is what our people instill in each other, is that we're going to be integrity, humility, and accountability.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. And I love that there's kind of a core focus, right? A central focus that people can rely on and depend on. And when we have that and everybody knows it, it gives us, it creates kind of a way within the organization that this is the standard. It's this or something better, right? And if anything's falling below that, well, we tend to catch it. We tend to kind of start to call each other out, and I think that's important. Probably helps do some of the work for you. With that in mind, let's talk about culture a little bit, because I think these kind of play with each other. And what is it in your mind? What does it take to create great culture intentionally?
Well, number one, I think it starts with good leadership, and leadership understanding that you want to build a culture that people want to be a part of the team, right? And that they feel they're part of the team, right? That they're not just being told what to do, that they are a part of the process of, with the end in sight. How do we get there? And let me build my plan. So I would say it starts there, and building that culture. Also, just the collaboration. I was about to say there as well. External and internal are two different things when you're talking about culture or even employee retention. External with your customers, that can go really well, or that can be, you can look like a tough company to work with. But internally, there's a lot of inner department stuff that goes on, and it's amazing how people act externally versus internally. But we got to strive as leaders, intentional agribusiness leaders, to keep that consistent in both realms. Internally, when you're working with your marketing, technology, and other departments, HR, whatever it may be, because there's a lot of debates internally that happen that are probably as what I want to say, as strong as an external debate. I mean, sometimes I enjoy getting back to the customer. Sometimes that's a little bit easier, but as long as you keep that culture consistent, I would say that's valuable to a company, and making your people feel like they belong in that culture, and that they want to be along with each other. Size has a bit to do with it, but even if you are a really, really large company, there's ways to break that out. We have the advantage of not being the biggest supplier. So a lot of what we do internally across our committees, whether it's groups of people that get along and have the same interests in mind, we have a lot of that I'll call it family atmosphere is something we've used here at Valent in my many years of being here, that we say that a lot. It seems a little bit like a family. It doesn't feel like, hey, you're just a person somewhere, a number. We really try to make our people feel like they have a belonging, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to put it. And when we think about good leadership driving culture, I want to go back to the top of your answer, and I want to tie this together with accountability. How do leaders drive accountability? I mean, when we talk about, it's got to be the same for, top third, middle third, bottom third, those kind of things. I think that's important. But I mean, is it the old carrot and the stick these days? What's your take on how do you hold people accountable?
That's a tough question, because I mean, I would say even something I continue to try and work on is to try and hold my people more accountable. I
Mm-hmm.
have a method of leading folks from, like I say, as one of them. And I won't say soft for being nice, but actually letting them be part of the process. But if we build the process and say we're going to get to here, and there's step 1, 2, 3, and 4 you need to do, but you haven't done it. At some point, I got to come back and say, hey, we
Yeah.
built the ship together. You did step 1, but you didn't do step 2 or 3. Come on, right?
Yeah.
Now there's different ways to do that and really hold them accountable, but I think people understand it more and are bought in more if they're part of the process. Like, hey, we built this together, but you didn't follow through. So you have to do that. I would say there's probably a time where you're letting folks do the process, but once it's firmed up, now you need to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Once they start doing it, you give them a little lag time, I would say, because we all have busy lives and too much going on.
Yeah.
But then there's a point where it's like, hey, this is overdue. In fact, I can say I actually just sent a message like that today. I said, hey, this is overdue. Wait,
Mm-hmm.
come on. You're late. Get this done. Let's get this in just like the rest have. So there comes a point where there's a line like, hey, we got to be accountable. And the more I hold my regional managers accountable, the more they'll see how to hold their reps accountable. Because to your point, it's $1 million question. How do you hold people accountable without them getting defensive? Right. People
Mm-hmm.
can snap to defense right away versus really understanding you're right. I'm a little behind here, or I need to get this done this way.
Yeah. So I love the intentionality and what you're describing, Matt, around bringing people along and having them be a part of the process creation, whatever the process may be. But they had some input, and we all agreed that yes, this is step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and we're all going to do it by set date, right? So you're bringing them along in the process, and then if they're falling behind it, at the end of the day, somebody has to manage the project. That's probably you, right? That's the team lead. Somebody's making sure that everything's getting done. And yeah, somebody gets I mean, at that point, we have, I think, a better permission to call people out, where some people maybe struggle to hold people accountable to what they said they were going to do or what they were asked to do, especially if they didn't have input at the beginning.
And I would bet 50% of the time the reason they have trouble holding them accountable or they're not doing it is that employee was never bought in from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
That you said, hey, here's step 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you have to do it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of the response you got. And then you're going, hey, why have you done it? Well, it probably was never bought into the beginning, right? So the more you can make sure they're bought in before you say, all right, here's the line in the sand, this is what we're doing, I think it's easier to hold people accountable.
Absolutely. And I think, when I'm seeing somebody not show up consistently, and there have been times when I haven't shown up consistently. When I see somebody maybe consistently being late on, some of those middle steps or some part of the project along the way, it tells me two things. One, there's probably something else going on, right? Probably something else going on. And so it lends itself to a conversation. And I'm highlighting this because it's another part that you've already mentioned. I just want to frame it up in and put an exclamation point on this. What Matt's talking about is creating a conversational way of leadership, being available, being one of the people, not necessarily just dictating everything from the top down all the time. There are times when you got to go take the hill, lead the team, go get stuff done. But then, the 90% of the rest of the time, we should be able to walk people through this, this kind of a process. So I like that, right? We're bringing people along, but you get to notice, and hopefully that puts you in a position to really be a coach and be a mentor to the people that you lead, right? Because we're like, hey, what else is going on? And then the other part, and this is a little bit more one of those constructive criticism type conversations, I think. But if it's showing up somewhere, if it's showing up on one project, I mean, you can almost guarantee it's showing up somewhere else.
Yep.
Right. I can
And
say that objectively, positively, and negatively, but if it's showing up somewhere, I bet you it's showing up somewhere else.
that's where I go back to the, the humility, if you want to call it that, but also building trust with your employees. Much easier when I have 8 direct reports with 45 people that report to them. But if you had 500 people that are in a factory, working somewhere, it's very hard to build that trust and that empathy with them. But if you know it's something else, like, hey, they just aren't being accountable, not just because they didn't like the project, maybe it's more going on in their life than that. Hopefully you've built the relationship and the trust with that employee, or at least their manager, to say, hey, let's dig into this, right? I mean, we got to care for our people, because if we don't care and listen to our people, they'll keep not being accountable for some odd reason that they won't tell us, right? But at least if we have that relationship and that empathy and listen to them, doesn't give them an excuse, don't get me wrong, right? I mean, I've had people say, hey, here's what's going on. I'm like, all right, I get that. So what do we need to do? Do we need to take time away? What do we got to do? But we have a job to get done. That's still the number one priority. So, but yeah, I think that's what I try to work with my managers on. Is number one, yes, holding everybody accountable, but also make sure that you're close enough with that employee that they can come to you and say, hey, something's going on, which is why I have not been doing my best.
For sure. Love it, man. Love the intention behind what you're doing and how you're getting it done. We spent most of our time so far talking about how to get it done. Let's talk a little bit about Matt. Just out of curiosity, and what's been a big hurdle that you've had to overcome? If you had to say, this is the biggest hurdle I've overcome in my career, what would you call it?
Well, there's all kinds of hurdles, right? That's why we work in agriculture. Every year is a new year, and everything's different. And
there are easier ways to make money. Let's
yeah, there's another tough year, right? We just saw some of that. So I would say, actually, probably one of the biggest things from the leadership perspective I've had, and I think many people go through this. In fact, I have 5 regional managers. 4 of them I have brought into management people. So I guess that's kind of a pedestal I can stand on. And I still coach them and work with them, and they're great leaders. But when I became a regional manager 17 years ago, I was actually going from a sales rep to a regional manager. Was the only person in Valent that really has done that. But I went from sitting next to my peers to being their boss. And I would say that's challenging. That's probably the biggest challenge I had. Wasn't, I'll say, financially struggling. It was just how to get employees to understand that, yes, I'm your friend, I'm your buddy, I'm your peer, but I have a job to do, right? So I can hang out with you, talk about some things, but at some point I'm going to have to flip that switch and say, yes, but we have a job to do, right? And it's building that trust, keeping that trust, I should say, with that employee, that, yeah, you're still one of them, but you do have a different role now to make sure everybody's accountable, to go back to our accountability.
Yeah.
But that was something that I think is a challenge. I think many people probably deal with that if they stay with the same company a long time.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Actually, I've run into a lot of coaching clients over the years that have had similar challenges. What if somebody was facing that today? If they're in that new in the role, they just got upgraded to the leadership chair. Now they're leading the people that they used to drink Busch Lights with, at the at the end of the day. What advice would you give?
I think it's just be transparent, right? It goes back to my integrity attribute, is make sure that they know, yeah, we can sit down. Heck, I'll even say, hey, if you want to vent, go ahead, let's vent, right? But at some point, I have to say, all right, now I'm the boss, right? So what are we going to do to fix this? It can't be, and as long as that employee understands that, hey, I have a new role, right? I mean, it doesn't mean I cut it off and that you can't come to me. You still got to have that trust and that dialogue, but you do have to let your employees know that my job, just like your job is to sell whatever millions, my job is to make sure that we are selling the millions, that everybody's doing it. So and that we're implementing all the tactics. So to me, it's just being transparent, right? And not coming across going from their friend peer with Busch Lights to all of a sudden coming out with a rubber mallet, swacking them around, saying, I know everything you're doing and you need to fix it. Hang on, slow down, right? I would say that's another piece of advice I've given the newer regional managers, is they always ask, what's the biggest piece of advice you can give me? I'd say, pace yourself. Just pace yourself. You're going to come into a really busy world with a lot of things to do. You don't have to change the world in the first 3 months. pace
Yeah.
yourself, right? Get to know it, take it one step at a time. But we're picking you as a regional manager because we know you got those good ideas. We know you have that initiative. We know you got that work ethic. Just remember, you got to pace yourself in that. Otherwise, you're going to come across too rapidly to the employees of, wow, who's this person that came out of a shell?
Yeah, I like that advice of pacing yourself, and I think often people we're not patient,
No,
right? Like
not in this world
we
anymore.
put the seed in the ground, we want to see it tomorrow, right?
We
So
I
that
remember the day when we used to send an email and you'd be happy if you got an email back in a week. Now,
yeah,
if you send an email and you don't get a response in a day, people are upset. Like, my
right,
gosh, we
yeah.
are in.
We are very impatient. We are very impatient. So, well, I think if you're graduating from that role, right, you're going from team member to now team leader.
Mhm.
The other piece I would even throw on just to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, yeah, be patient, and like that chapter has closed.
Yeah.
You got the nod for a reason. There's something about you, something in the way that you've been performing and what people see in you, the potential that people see in you. And so there has to sort of be a death of the old and the birth of a new, just like any hero's journey, any character development. If you watch a movie, that old person kind of has to go away, and now it's the new person emerges. And there's a part of that that's okay. I'm not saying that we be separate or try to be better than the group that we're now leading, but
Yep.
you've been called to now steward the group that you were once just a part of.
I would also say, as the manager who's picking that manager and saying, hey, we're selecting you, make sure you're identifying the reasons you selected them, right? There are probably some characteristics they were doing in their old role that you thought, hey, you're a leader of the pack, right? People are following what you're doing, whether it's by example or it's verbally or it's work ethic. You point those out to say, hey, keep doing that because that's what people were following. And you may have not known it, but they were following it, right? So
Absolutely.
it's maybe the transition to plug on the intentional. It's kind of the transition from the really, really unintentional, just leader of the pack of the group to now you are the leader. So now you have to be a little more intentional with what you're doing, but doesn't mean you got to totally change everything. Keep doing what you've been doing, but make sure people know why you're doing it because you've taken on this new character, new role.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. I'm glad we talked about that. That was I think that's going to be really helpful for somebody listening in because I promise you there's somebody right now that's going through exactly that.
Yeah.
Definitely
Yeah.
needs to hear that somebody else has been there too. So, what's so that was biggest hurdle. What's your biggest win?
Oh, I would say it's kind of it was what I mentioned earlier, just teaching other people how to lead people, right? I I'm a scientist in college and degree, right? Agronomy, horticulture, and chemistry. But as I got into this company, they realized I have a lot of coaching and background. My father and brother are both coaches, so I have a lot of people leadership skills. And when you teach someone how to do something, whether that's do a block or run a play or how to manage people, it's pretty exciting to step back and let them manage it, right? So they may come to you with a lot of questions and a lot of ideas, but the more you can let them grow and understand how to do it themselves, and get a team underneath them, it's exciting to see. And I think all of us should, with that humility, is step back and let them take the credit of being a great manager of the people, knowing that a lot of it was you guiding them along with some of the questions and stuff. So I would say seeing the success of my people that are managing other people is exciting for me. Probably my biggest win.
That's a fantastic win. And along the same vein, any pro tips for people that are handing off, building up those new leaders? We've talked a lot about a fair number of things here today already, Matt, but just curious, what, how do you help somebody go from being that new leader to just really developing a high level of certainty in that role?
There's a lot of things. I mean, as much as I probably said be patient before, you really do have to come up, like you said, take that character on. So try to get my folks to understand, hey, this is your new role. So what's your plan? And make sure you got your people bought in, right? I go back to that buy-in. Make sure they're bought in, that you are the leader of the pack. They trust you. They're going to work with you, and start getting there year by year by year. But eventually, you're really going to see folks that are very loyal to you if you're loyal to them, right?
Yeah.
As we all say in sales, so you got to have one foot with them and one foot with, you got to make sure you're balanced of what we have to get done and what they want to get done, and make sure everybody's bought in and it's pretty balanced. So I would say that's probably the biggest thing. And as you get someone in there too, kind of to my point earlier, as much as you want to do things for folks or tell them exactly how to do it, suggest it, don't tell them exactly, and see how they use it with their own personality, right? Because if I tell a manager, hey, this person said this with this account, here's exactly what I would do. Well, like I always say, what do I need them for, right? And they're not going to be able to deliver that message the same way I am. My personality is not the same as my 5 regional managers, I guarantee you. So as long as they know the objective in mind, where they got to get that person, I think it's valuable to let them do their own style, right? Is probably be my other advice. I think too many managers try to instill their own management style on the next manager. But
yeah, that's great advice. Great advice. And really appreciate you kind of framing that up there, so that, again, somebody going through that at this particular stage, just having this kind of a resource to say, hey, how do we do it? Well, don't do it all for them right away, just because you're concerned about it getting done right, or what's gonna happen on the backside. That's gonna slow down the process, right? Slow down the progress of the development of that individual that they now lead.
And I think there's also that point of that magical word of micromanagement. Even though I was the regional manager, now I hire someone to be the regional manager, I'm not going to have them do it exactly the same way I did. I'll tell them, here's kind of what I did. Here's how I planned it. Go about it your own way. And as a manager, I think that's hard for some of us to say, all right, end in sight. Did they get there? Did they take the exact same path as me? Maybe, maybe not. But if you're going to make them take the exact same path as you, we go back to employee retention, you're not going to keep them very long if everything you did, you want them to do, right? As long as they're getting to the same spot in whatever that objective or tactic or chore is, I think it's good, right? And it lets people evolve into who they want to be.
I go through the same thing with my wife, actually. Nothing frustrates her more than when I come to her with an idea and I say, hey, you know what? I really think that we should move this around in the living room. And that was a suggestion that she made 2 months ago. And it infuriates her, but now it's my idea. Now I'm motivated to go do it. It's the same concept.
No, exactly. I get that mention from my wife as well. It's just, you treat me a little more like your employees. Like when I come into the kitchen, say, hey, let me help, and start doing stuff. It's not a good spot. It's like, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Because I want it my way. It's like, he's up here. Let me do it my way. Okay. All right. So you kind of you got to do it both in personal and work life, right? Let folks build their own path.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, man. Well, let's get a couple of speed round questions in here towards the tail end here. What's a good book that you like? Anything that's really been helpful for you over the years?
So I would say a lot of the early ones I read were John Maxwell. So that's a lot of leadership books. But one I would throw out, which is a curveball, going back to my coaching past, it actually is a great book. And if you know him or don't know him, he's interesting to learn about. It's an autobiography, which is what I used to be in, reading a lot about Lou Holtz coaches. But Lou Holtz, Wins, Losses, and Lessons. It's actually a great book on, without being a true, again, intentional, hey, here's exactly how you lead people. It's autobiography about his life, but he's a very, very interesting person and amazing person and a great leader, obviously, as we all know he was.
Awesome. Yeah, we have to put that in the
may not be along your training and leadership books, but I'm just going to tell you it's a good book. I have a whole bunch.
For sure.
Know where to go with that, but I thought I'm going to throw a curveball out at you. So
yeah, I mean, I like that. I mean, a lot of in fact, you may be the first one to actually mention Maxwell. I think other people have brought up maybe titles over the course of some of these interviews, but definitely the first one to bring in Lou Holtz. And yeah, I think that's something worth putting on the reading list. And I know my wife actually saw him speak in person at an EntreLeadership event years ago, and said he was really fascinating to listen to. So. Good. All right. You're a busy guy, right? You got a whole country to take care of as far as the business. You got regional managers to take care of. You probably got family to take care of on top of it all. So how do you keep your energy up? How do you maximize your productivity? What are your tips?
Oh, I would say, you have to schedule your time. We all are, even post-COVID, just busy, 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 even busier than we were pre-COVID, I think. So you got to draw the line at some point of when you shut it down. But I would say I get a lot of my energy really from my people. And when I see people that are passionate, and as much as it feels like it's a fire or it's stress or it's the good thing is when people are bringing those fires to you, at least they have the passion, right? You really got to start worrying about folks when they aren't bringing fires to you or aren't bringing issues to you, because that means they're probably not into it. So I would say that the other thing, I'm still a customer person. Everybody knows that at Valent. I love hanging out with the customer or going to visit the customer. That motivates me because those conversations are usually very optimistic in what we can do and how we can get better. And it gives you that energy of, hey, there's more we can do. So those are the work ones. I mean, yeah, exercise, run dogs, do a little hunting, fishing, things like that when I can. But those things re-energize you and give you a little time away to shut it off. But it's always a magical place when you can find a place without a cell signal just for a few days.
It is. As we record this, we're in the midst of hunting season, and I'm enjoying those early dark hours, in the deer stand, and then again late at night right now. And I'll be honest, I'll let the phone slip out once in a while. I'll hit an email or a text message to the team, but I am trying to shut it off, and that's a good place to recalibrate.
Yeah.
So, good stuff. All right, Matt, this has been a treasure trove of good information. If people have listened this far, then they have learned a ton around how do we build intentional culture? How do we attract and retain? How do we lead? How do we take on new leadership roles? Man, I mean, there's been a bunch of it in here. So anything you'd like to add or pile on with before we fully bring it in for a landing today?
No, I think it's been a good discussion. I really, like I say, leading people can be as much as selling and finishing and closing a number is awesome. And it's sometimes hard to convince sales folks to become people leaders because there's just not that close, right? There's not that fix of, hey, I got it. It's a little more subjective, but when you do see people excel and come out of their norm and become leaders and be successful, it's just as exciting as, selling $500,000 to somebody on one sales call, but it just takes a little more time, right? It's not as definitive in that, but it can be exciting. And I think it's good to see good leaders out there that work with their people and understand and listen to them, have some empathy.
Good stuff, man. Great way to end it. Thank you for being on with me today.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you, Mark.